Good afternoon. We are here for Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. It's March 9th at 1:45. We have a few items on the agenda, starting with our Parks Capital Improvements Program. Before we turn it over to Ms. Dunn and Council staff, I'll just turn it over to the Planning Board Chair and to the Director to see if you want to walk through and give some overview of your budget request and your budget that's before us, and then we can walk through with Pam and the packet.
Yeah, thank you. Artie here as Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. And I'll let our Director, Mitty Figueredo, lead us out this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitty Figueredo, for the record. When we were preparing our CIP request this cycle, we were trying to do what we hope we have a reputation for doing, which is bring to the Planning Board and then to the Council a request that reflects really what our fundamental needs are in order to keep a well-maintained park system and move forward with projects for which there is broad support from the Council and, frankly, the community. So to simplify matters and give you a very sort of high-level view of what our request ultimately is and what we would be asking to have restored to us, is we requested an increase in general obligation bonds for Wheaton Regional Park. We requested an additional $4 million a year to sub out for program open space funding that we are no longer getting, and an additional $1 million to add a bathroom to the Wheaton Action Sports Park. We requested $2.4 million in GEO bonds for our solar initiative. Again, that is an initiative that seeks to double the amount of solar we produce on parkland over the next 5 years, and that's $400,000 a year that we were asking for. I do want to note that for those first 2 years in the CIP, $400,000 each of those years, that's really important funding for us because it leverages some federal tax credits that are sunsetting. In addition, we had an ask of $4.8 million in additional current revenue. $3 million of that current revenue request is for PLAR. And as you all know, PLAR is the PDF that fixes all of the broken things in parks that need to be fixed. It's fundamental to the maintenance of our infrastructure. And then the additional $1.8 million in current revenue was to go to natural surface trails, which is our most popular amenity in parks. And this $1.8 million would allow us to fix something, or at least start making progress on fixing something like 60 bridges along our natural surface trails that need to be replaced, and make some important connections between Little Bennett and Black Hill Regional Park. So at a very high level, that was what we asked for, and that was what was cut from our request, and we would be asking for it to be restored. So thank you.
Great. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the impact would be of the cuts, and kind of, are there
absolutely
kind of different points at which, restoration would have different impacts? If you want to talk a little bit about that, if you can. So
I'll start with our request for the additional GEO bonds for Wheaton Regional Park. If you all recall, we succeeded kind of beyond our wildest hopes over the last couple of years in securing $5.5 million in state capital grants for Wheaton Regional Park. If we were not to receive the GEO bond funding that we asked for during this cycle for Wheaton, we cannot move forward with the Wheaton Action Sports Park, and we put that $5.5 million at risk. That's the impact to Wheaton. The solar initiative, again, without the $2.4 million in GEO bonds, I will say we would have to probably delay some of these solar projects that we had hoped would get us to this goal of doubling solar. We can, with some money, move forward, but probably won't hit that 5-year goal. the impact of not getting the current revenue on PLAR, we pulled together, just to give you a picture, some of the projects that we expect to fund out of PLAR over this cycle, and they include things like improvements, really mold remediation to our Brookside Nature Center, the rehabilitation of the amphitheater at Cabin John Regional Park, renovation of the picnic area at Valley Mill, Candy Cane City replacement of the bridge, which is really important, and a bunch of other of these kinds of, I would describe them as unsexy but very necessary repairs. And then, of course, our natural surface trails, that's really scalable. That's the beauty part of, natural surface trails, is that we can build with what we have. But again, it's our most popular amenity and the one that's most cost effective for us to quickly implement for park users. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Girondo. I was going to turn over to staff and then open up to questions and comments, if that's okay. All right. Happy to go through the packet. Ms. Dunn, if you could just briefly go through the issues that you raised in the packet, and then we can open it up to colleagues for comments and questions for both you and for Parks.
Great. Thank you and good afternoon. So the way that the staff report is laid out, this is at the top of the second page of the staff report, is that in the very first section we'll address some general issues. I'll go through those for the committee. You can ask questions. The second section describes new projects. There's just one. It won't really be very new to you. We've talked about it before. The third section does have information on any of the projects in the CIP that are being requested for change, which means change either in scope or a change in funding. There are 10 of those that are development projects and one that's acquisition. Then there's a very large section of ones that I call consent. They are projects where there's absolutely no change at all, but they're still active, or they're asking for 2 additional years, those 2 additional fiscal years in the CIP at level funding. And so everything is in the staff report for transparency so that anyone can see it. But the largest section will be those that really aren't requesting any significant change, just 2 additional years at level funding. Then there's a section again for transparency and for everyone to know. There are projects recommended for closeout or pending closeout. And then lastly, the section where I imagine the committee will spend some time, but we've already started the discussion, is addressing the Executive's Affordability Reconciliation PDF, and that's section 6. So with that, the first section, general issues. As Ms. Figueredo has already mentioned, the CIP that has been requested by the Planning Board is representing reductions in program open space funding and contributions. These 2 funding sources reflect changes to a couple different PDFs. I will note those as we go through. For the program open space, the funding source affects Legacy Urban Space and Wheaton Regional Park the most. And as we've just heard, that there's been an analogous request to increase GeoBonds for that Wheaton Regional Park project to help maintain level funding for that project. The Affordability Reconciliation PDF, as also has been noted, has come with a proposed reduction in current revenue of $4.8 million and a recommended reduction in GeoBond expenditures of $6.4 million. Again, those will be discussed at the very last after you've seen the full CIP request. As you know, public hearing testimony was obviously very much in favor of parks, as it is every year, which is always encouraging to hear how much the county uses the park system and how valued it is to the residents of Montgomery County. And then the last issue before the committee is that the committee and council received a letter from Councilmember Lutke in her letter requesting funding for the Johnson's local park, that it become its own CIP item rather than currently now it is text within the Ballparks Initiative PDF. And then she would request an additional $2.5 million in GeoBond funding for that local park to enhance what's being designed for the community there, to work with the parks in that regard.
There we go. Okay. It's a little technical glitch. Just before turning it to colleagues, Johnson's local park, can you just speak to that, of any impact and any view of having it as a separate PDF, and then the $2.5 million that's been requested on that? Obviously, I'll just note, Johnson Local Park, we've been very supportive at this committee. Councilmember Giwando and I were involved with Councilmember Reamer when he really led the way on this. That was the ballpark side. I had worked very intimately on the zoning side of this issue with Councilmember Katz and Councilmember Navarro to allow for the housing piece of it. And there's the public-private partnership with some of our nonprofit partners and Pastor Warner and others on the housing piece. So we're all in on this project, and I think very supportive. We just want to know what the impact is of that, obviously within constrained dynamics where we're talking about what potential cuts would have to be made based on the county executive's proposal here.
Yes, thank you. So for several years now, we have been planning a park refresher at Johnson's Local Park. It's a park that is due for some improvements and renovations. But we've also been working over the last couple of years with some community members who are also very engaged in the other pieces of this effort that you were referring to, Councilmember Friedson. And as a result of some of those ongoing discussions, it has become apparent that there are some desires to expand the scope of this project beyond what we would normally do as a park refresher. So we have a certain amount of money in our CIP that is in our Parks Refreshers PDF that we contemplated spending on this park, but it now looks like in order to expand the scope of the project, it's probably going to be another 2.5 minimum additional millions of dollars in funding to get to the full contemplated scope of the project. And because the project is now of such a scope and potential cost, we do believe if that is sort of the will of the council to move forward with a project like that, for the Parks Department to pursue a project like that, we would need to do this as a standalone project. You all know we don't do those very often anymore, but this seems like it would warrant that kind of approach, and that would allow us to develop a facility plan over the next year or so. And once we have a facility plan, which is about 30% design, we have a more detailed cost of the project. So that's, I think, where that $2.5 million comes from and what having this as a standalone would allow us to do.
What would the minimum amount be for a standalone to make sense to accomplish what you're looking to do? Obviously, $2.5 million is the goal, but if that were impossible, geo bonds are limited. There's a lot of competing dynamics. We're trying to work through that. I just want to, you're not negotiating against yourself.
Sure,
I'm just
sure.
trying to understand in terms of where we end up.
So, and you're talking about the additional funding for just this standalone right now, not the full cost of the project. Okay.
Correct.
Well,
I guess the question
yeah.
is, if $2.5 million is identified, then obviously the standalone
Sure.
PDF is what we would like to have approved in the final capital budget. The question, maybe better stated, would be if at the end of the budget, the full $2.5 million isn't able to be identified, does that mean that having a standalone PDF would not be appropriate or worthwhile from your perspective? Or does that mean keeping the standalone PDF and then having it for future capital
Yes.
budgets and have it as a part of your work program,
Yes.
et cetera, would be worthwhile?
I think it would
those
still
are
be worthwhile.
Related, but two separate questions. Do we have a standalone PDF, which I think makes a lot of sense?
Yes.
And then two, how much money can we put in it?
Right. So I think it does make sense to have a standalone PDF. And, you know, we are pursuing additional sources of funding at this very moment at the state. We are trying to squeeze anything that we can get to supplement this project. So, and it's not something, again, we don't have a facility plan for it yet, so we don't have a full scope of cost. So if the council were to create a standalone PDF and partially put some money in it, if not the entire $2.5 million, then that's something we can work with and try in the meantime to identify and appropriate additional sources of funding. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, I think standalone PDF makes sense. So there's nodding. I think we all agree on that. We've historically been very supportive of this project. So let's just agree to that. We're going to move forward with a standalone PDF on this. We're going to have to make decisions on what gets allocated to this standalone PDF, but not having it as a added language of another level of effort PDF, but have it as its own standalone PDF, I think is important.
Yes.
And the only
Ms. Dunn.
question I would then ask is, I think it dawned on me that we don't typically fund local parks with GEO bonds because they must be regional parks to receive, I think, our GEO bond funding. And all the local park funding is typically done through MNC PPC bonds or state aid or something else. So just something, I realized when we go through all the PDFs, we don't have any local parks funded with GEO bonds. I think that's a requirement, that it must be countywide.
This is Andy Frank. I head up the Park Development Division. I do think typically park bonds are for local parks, and GEO bonds are generally used for regional parks. So, but there is, I believe there are different PDFs that kind of share that. Urban Park Elements has money on each side. So Urban Park, what Park Refreshers is, Park Refreshers is geared toward the local parks, yeah. But there are examples, and the facility that is being talked about in terms of the baseball field and the historic baseball field would be more of a regional service. It would be something that I think it would be, you could consider in GEO bond.
So
The
my-
classification
yeah.
of the park is a local park, but it's really going to go beyond being a local park at this point. We're contemplating putting in a lighted ball field here. That is not the kind of thing we normally do in a local park.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think we should definitely approve the PDF. I think we can look into this question of GEO bonds and other pots of money. I think I think we can express support and interest in providing as much support as we can to this, but, having some unanswered question, not committing to a specific dollar amount at this point or a particular pot of money yet at this point. For a number of reasons. And then I think we have plenty of time to come back and revisit this. There's a legislative session, state aid and other dynamics that impacts parks. There's the rest of the operating budget that is about to drop here momentarily. And so we can, I think, revisit the source of funds, the amount of funds, and the mechanism later. Is that? Yes. Okay. So that was the new item. We have the broader question, kind of the big multi-million-dollar question here of what to do with the county executive's proposal and how we take that up. I'm going to open it up to colleagues who would express interest.
Before we do
Yeah,
that,
please.
there is actually one new project that was not this one. This was under issues.
Yeah,
Not sure where the
please.
committee would go with it, but the new project that actually is in the current requested CIP is the Parkway Improvements PDF, and that's what's on the third page of the staff report. And this one we have heard about before. The parks had requested it in the past. The committee was very supportive, but what needed to get put in place was the MOU with the Department of Transportation, and all those things have now been done, all the loose ends tied up, and so it is now a transfer of the funding and the responsibility of Sligo Creek Parkway, Beach Drive, and Little Falls Parkway to the Parks Department, and that's represented in this Parkway Improvements PDF.
And just to clarify, it's not new money. It's the new responsibility reflective of the MOU that we discussed last year.
Right.
That has now been executed. It was in process and in discussion, has been executed. So not a financial decision, more of an accounting question,
A new
an
project, but
operational
not a new-
responsibility question. Is that fair? Okay. So no new financial projects, but it's an important update, and thank you for flagging that. But I don't think a particular discussion point on that besides reiterating our support for that evolution based on the MOU. All right, let me open it up to colleagues. Councilmember Jawando and then Council President.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. Appreciate the work Parks does. I'm a little perplexed by the non-submission of non-recommended reductions. That's never happened. I've been on this committee for 8 years now, and that has never happened. So I just chaired a committee earlier this morning where I took some very non-recommended reductions from Montgomery College, which I'd also consider, I'd put them in your category of like, it's not a huge capital budget for us. They are very good fiscal stewards. They use the money well, but they had to take a haircut too, and prioritize. So if you could, I want to hear the rationale there, and then I'd also like to hear from, I guess, OMB. Are you here from OMB? Okay, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but you'll say it when you speak. I'd like to hear from there, and it's just, I don't like the process of it, and it makes it difficult for me to go through this realizing GO bonds are limited. Everyone is going to have to take a reduction. Even if we meet the executive's request, there's still a huge delta, even if people, with the non-recommended cuts that we're accepting from other committees. So I'd like to hear from both of you on that.
So you're correct. Normally, when we get a number, whether it's for the CIP or the operating budget, we're given, in the case of the CIP, an affordability PDF, and then it's for us to identify where those reductions would have to come from, and those are our non-recommended reductions. This time, it was so straightforward. It wasn't just a number, and then we could identify where we would prefer to find those savings. It was really just essentially that our request was wiped out. So it's implicitly our non-recommended reductions are the increases we asked for. That's where we would, if the council agreed with the county executive's recommendation, we would take the hit to Wheaton Regional Park, the hit to the solar initiative, lose all our current revenue request. It was pretty clean.
So, you talked about and I want to hear from you. You talked about the solar thing. Obviously we all love solar, but those, I wouldn't put that in we have to do it right now. You talked about delaying. Normally these things are talks about in the terms of delay, or we'll do it when the financial situation is better. The Wheaton Regional is, I think, in a different bucket.
Yes.
In that we're leveraging other funding and we want that to, move forward. But it sounds to me that, PLAR is always a discussion. Look, I got a $5 billion request from Dr. Taylor that was cut to $2.5 billion for schools that are falling apart. 40% of have a bad HVAC, and then that was cut down again by the county executive to $1.5 billion, and we're not even going to be able to fund that. So when I hear a solar panel on a thing, that it's just hard for me to reconcile that's you don't have to share in the pain that it's and not even suggest it.
I mean, I would just say this. Our total request was $11 million. It's, in the scheme of things, our CIP, our GO bonds, for example, are maybe 4% of all the GO bonds the county puts out. It's such a small dollar amount that it really is up to the will of the council whether to restore any of it or how much. But these are the PDFs that we would take it from. And as for the PLAR, we requested an additional $3 million. I mean, $3 million to fix playgrounds and, just broken things in parks, I think it's a pitifully small number. So obviously it's up to the council to make a decision as to whether restore any of it, but that's where it would come from. Those are our non-recommended reductions. It's everything that we're not getting because of the county executives zeroing out of our request.
And as Director Figueredo said, some of the solar we would lose tax credits if, it's like if we did not do those things. Not all of it, but the first 2 years we would.
There would be some that good. All right. Yes. And please say
Hi.
I'm sorry.
No worries. Abdul Rauf. I'm Office of Management and Budget Analyst. A couple of points. So the GO bond capacity, in terms of that, the MCPS did eat up a lot of the capacity for the GO bonds. Another point, current revenue decisions are being held for March 15th, just so we can get a better picture about what the cash situation looks like. But Parks and Planning is correct, and there was a couple of sort of susceptible points where they could have seen cuts. Office of GO bonds is something that most departments here are facing, but also program open space funds. So that involved shuffling some cash around. Ultimately, we sort of give a number to Parks and Planning, discuss what the increase could look like. If the Wheaton Regional Park is the project where they want to take it out of, ultimately, they can sort of decide how the puzzle fits on that. But happy to answer any other questions.
Okay. Council staff put some things in the packet. I mean, you made some suggestions on I know, but I just feel like whatever order we want to do this, I defer to the chair, but I'm uncomfortable with being in the position of not knowing what what the cuts would be and not having a formal transmission of that. I know you just said these would be the cuts, so I appreciate that. So I guess when we get to that portion of, I know that's like 23 of the packet, so I don't know how you want to order it, but to me, that's part of the picture here. So,
Council President.
And I appreciate what Councilmember Jawondo mentioned, because it's a tough year, and the needs are huge, and I know where you're coming from, and I feel you and hear you, and I appreciate that you brought it up. With all that said, do not touch Wheaton Regional Park. I am telling you, we made a promise, and I feel like every single year this is the park that is not Wheaton, it's a regional park. And when I say regional, I'm not talking within Montgomery County. It's actually the Washington, D.C. region, and it's so important for this diverse community. And I am going to fight for it because I think it's the right thing. Every now and then I was in an event with Councilmember Jawondo, I think it was like 2 weeks ago at the Historic Farm, and folks there, the farmers, were pushing for the incubator for farmers. Of course we want it, but I even got up and defended you guys, saying that I know the Parks Department also want it, but we don't have the money. And continue to add projects when we cannot fulfill the ones that we have promised. It's wrong. This one, Wheaton Regional Park, has been a promise for a long time, and it needs to happen. So that's all I'm going to say right now before council staff continues with her presentation.
Yeah, I mean, we have what has been suggested as the non-recommended cuts, essentially. I mean, the fundamental question here is whether or not we want to suggest accepting non-recommended cuts right now, whether we want to restore funding, whether we want to hold off on making final decisions on this until we have a better picture of current revenue and the operating budgets, and some of these dynamics can change. Historically, we have been champions of fighting for full funding of the parks capital budget in this committee. That has always been our posture since I have served in this role. I would personally continue that effort. Obviously, we have to make tough choices at the end of the budget, but we have never this early in the game accepted that parks was going to be the first to be cut. That's essentially the posture that we have historically taken. So I don't know. There's a lot of information, as council staff noted, in the packet that speaks to all of these issues. If you have questions specifically on any of the items that have been raised in the packet, I think feel free to ask them. Unless there's anything specific to add, I'm not sure we need to go through line by line of the packet unless staff feels that we have missed something here.
No, the reason for putting everything in the packet is for the public and for the council eventually. As I noted, there were about 10 projects that had a change. We talked about a lot of those this morning, the energy project and the PLAR, Wheaton Regional. And then there were all the projects that didn't change, again, for information. And then the last part of the packet that Councilmember Jawondo was also mentioning on page 23 is the section related to the Affordability Reconciliation PDF. And the reason for putting it out here the way I did was noting that the energy conservation non-local parks, yes, the request was an increase for $2.4 million. You could keep it at level funding, although we've now heard this morning that for at least the first 2 years, so for $800,000, they would lose tax credits. So that might be a consideration, part of discussion later on down the road when you have a bigger picture. Wheaton Regional Park, you understand, by taking the reduction there would put it behind, because that request to increase GO bonds is really covering that program open space reduction. Page 25, the reason I put this in here is because I think it does come up, well, what else could they have done? Where else could you have taken a reduction in GO bonds? And what I wanted to show was, in fact, all the other projects that have GO bond funding in their CIP are really projects that have not requested any change at all, and they're trying to continue just to have level funding. So if you were to take it from somewhere else, you would also be going down below current funding levels. And then turning to the current revenue, just a similar analysis. You've got the planned life cycle asset replacement for non-local parks. They've asked to increase that and increase the trails, natural service and resource-based project. Those increases are equivalent to the amount that the county executive has recommended as that affordability PDF. You could reduce that to what the CE is recommending, and it would keep them at level funding. They wouldn't go below where they are today, but they also wouldn't increase. And then I summarize that at the very end of the staff report on page 27, so in 28. It's just all there in summary.
Council President.
Thank you for that. I do believe that we should stick with our tradition and defend the parks budget and not to recommend any reductions, especially for the GO bonds. And even conserving the energy conservation item, because you don't want to lose those tax credits, and it's so small. I feel that we need to defend it personally.
I would agree with you on that. What's the value of the tax credits that we would lose in the 2 years?
I think it's 30%.
And what's the monetary value?
So it's 400 in FY27 and 400 in FY28. So 30% of 800 is like what, 250-ish? Somebody's better at me than math. 240. Yeah, we're going to go with the engineer's number.
Got it. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Any comments, Councilmember Dronda?
Yeah, I guess it sounds like we're getting to a decision point. I mean, I think it would be nice to have obviously no one wants any reductions in anything. Like I think I literally chaired I've been in the theater arts building in Montgomery College for like 2 weeks in a row, and it's in horrible condition, and they're like juggling and balancing, trying to keep stuff in, and it's a difficult position to be in. I think it's why I've advocated that we need to increase our GO bonds, because we're borrowing what we did 15 years ago in real dollars, which in inflation adjusted dollars is $250 million less than it would have been then. So we're just never going to be able to keep up with things. But I do think we should have, and I guess this might be a council staff thing since we've had this discussion, on the non-recommended reductions, like where Parks is saying it would, and I think you've done that, but just be very clear that to meet the county executive's number, this is what they are saying they would reduce. And, even if the committee is saying we're not, I would be more comfortable to be in the position of, let's hold off, let's see where the revenue ends up. We're getting that on Friday. But not make any reductions, but not fully concur. So I don't know what the posture of the chair or my fellow committee member is. That's kind of where I would like to be, not doing, just kind of holding, which is, I think, kind of what you suggested as one of the options. But if folks don't want to do that, I get it. But I just feel like it ultimately everything is going to be considered in the whole picture. So, and I do think the idea that everyone's going to have to share in the fact that we don't have enough resources is an important principle, even if it's slightly. So I would just encourage the park and planning to think about that as we move forward. Maybe that's not what happens, but I just do think even if you can, I think about what we've done in the operating budget side, which you do, and we always fight to restore. If we have to do that again, I'll be happy to do it. But you do tier out, what the things are, and I know this is a little different in the CIP side, but I think the same principle applies. So you've kind of done that verbally here, and even if you could break out on the solar, you said the first 2 years. Okay, well, what would that mean? Does council staff's recommendation mean we could do a little, even if to get the tax credit, but then you could maybe delay the others? I just think it's an important principle given where we are with the CIP and the budget overall.
Could I make a friendly to try to bring us together, because that's what we normally do here, particularly with parks? I think we should support full funding for it. However, I also understand where you're coming from in the sense of having something from parks that says, here's what the operational impact would be if the council doesn't. So if we can balance that, if we say, the committee, the committee's interest is in, restoring the cuts to the CIP, but then having something from Parks that we're going to formally ask for. This is a, if we do, then that, and I want to hear from Parks to make sure you're comfortable with this too, because then I haven't talked to colleagues or to Parks through staff or anything like that. So I think this is, trying to respond in real time to say we appreciate the committee's support for our budget, which would allow us to do X, Y, and Z. However, here's what the operational impact would be if the council doesn't support at this level and this level, and break that down. And that would then guide us, and then we could revisit this, which we, potentially would have to in the operating budget, at the end of the operating budget discussion.
And that would include like what I said about the tax credit breakout.
Yeah, which would be exactly to say we would lose 2 years and the 240, and if we did that, here's another option we would have to pursue, and here's
fine with that.
The impact of that.
As long as you don't touch the geo bombs targeting Wheaton Regional Park, because I'm not gonna have this discussion again next year, and then next year, and then next year. Either we're in or we're not. This you shouldn't be touching. The energy conservation, sure, we can do that exercise with that one, but not everything else.
Well, I will point out too that though none of the cuts would be, I'm glad you don't have to do Wheaton Regional. You could do something else, right? There's a choice there, right?
No, well,
All of these are choices.
if you're talking about the PDFs that council staff identified that have geo bonds in them, I would not consider those options for finding money for a standalone project. We just normally would not do that. Those are the PDFs that fund all of the work that we do constantly in parks. So we're asking for, an additional $5 million for Wheaton Regional Park, 4 of which is to sub out for program open space. And that's funding that we need if we are going to move forward with the Wheaton Action Sports Park. And remember, we also have $5.5 million of state funding on the line. We really hustled to get that money.
Totally agree on the Wheaton Regional Park. My suggestion here isn't to say we're accepting the cuts. My suggestion here is to say, here's what the operational impact would be. To me, that helps to strengthen our argument.
We can do that
to the council from my perspective. But I do think, Councilmember Jawando is right that it is helpful to have the context of what it actually would mean in reality. It's not just we support it and we'll see what happens at the end. It's we're supportive of it, but there's some tough choices that are going to have to be made, and here's what the operational impact is going to be.
We're happy to work with council staff on that. Yes.
The operational impact to meet the county executive's number. That's what we're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can
broken out.
And without tiering it, you can say and you figure out what a number is that isn't funding 2/3 of a chair. I mean, just to give an example, is not a thing. Like you either buy a chair or you don't buy a chair. So and I don't know the answer to where that breakdown is, but I think you can say if you're not able to fully restore, but you have, this, we would lose the solar, but we'd be able to maintain replacing the program open space for Wheaton Regional Park, for
Absolutely.
instance. And here's what that cutoff would be. Then we would have the information, I think, that Councilmember Jawando is asking for and noting, which I think is legitimate. And we'd be able to make our final decisions and be in a better position to do it with the understanding of where current revenue is.
We can do that. We want to be helpful. And to Councilmember Jawando's point, some things are scalable, and we try to be very frank when those things are in front of you. So we can provide that additional information to help you all make your decision.
Okay, sounds good. And then we need to revisit Johnson's local park, just to be very clear. But we do want to take a look at the GeoBond question on that and whether or not there are other sources of revenue. I would strongly encourage the county executive has his operating budget coming out. Current revenue would be an option for that, just as an example, because it's it's basically like a down payment to get the ball moving, so to speak, on the field there, or to get the game going, or however you want to, whatever reference you want to use. But I think that we'll revisit that issue. But we did decide that we are going to have a standalone PDF, and I'll just reiterate how important I think Wheaton Regional is, and all the state support that we have obtained, and the community commitments that have been made. there. Obviously, the impacts of state tax or of tax credits, but Johnson's Local Park has been an ongoing huge priority of this and the prior council, and I hope that we can move forward on that. All right, so we have marching orders. Everybody understands where we're moving here? All right, great. All right, thank you. Thank you to the Planning Board Chair and the Parks Department. We appreciate you being here and all your work. We're going to move on to item 2 to today's agenda, which is Zoning Tax Amendment 2602, Overlay Zones, Regional Shopping Centers. I want to thank my colleague as the 2 district council members with regional shopping centers in our district. This is something that's important, and this is, I think, a pretty straightforward item. There is a technical amendment that was recommended by the Department of Permitting Services, which staff reviewed and is included in the packet, which makes sense and is a good clarification to make sure we're being consistent. And so let me turn it over to Mr. McCartney-Grigg to walk us through.
Thank you, Chair Friesen. And it's a pleasure to be before PHP handling a ZTA. It's my first official DTA, 2602. So the purpose of the bill...
Be careful what you wish for, my friends. This is the abyss of zoning text.
All right, let me get in and out. So
Kind of what we do here.
The purpose of the bill is to remove the 30% cap that's on household living uses for a site that's within the RSC overlay zone and RSC's regional shopping center, provided that that regional shopping center has at least 600 square feet that's retained within that overlay zone. Looking at, received a recommendation from the planning board that supported the ZTA with amendments by a 5-0 vote that they held on February 19, 2026. The board expressed support for the ZTA, but also recommended also an amendment in terms of expanding the household living use to not only multi-unit, which is right now, that's the way how it's drafted as introduced, but also expanding it to single-family, multi-unit, and townhomes. We'll get to that amendment later. For the climate assessment, the report came back and said there would be a minor mixed impact on greenhouse gas emissions and no impact on carbon or impact on community resilience and adaptive capacity. As for the RESJ statement that was released, factors are unknown in terms of assessing whether or not it would have positive or negative impact. But the RESJ statement did point out the fact that for compliance, they would have to a developer would have to comply with the moderately priced dwelling unit right now, and so they would have to meet those threshold standards as well. So that was the discussion point of it. Happy to go into the amendments. And so looking on page 3 of the packet, the first amendment is what I briefly discussed regarding the planning board's recommendation, whether or not this committee should extend or remove the 30% exemption and extend it to other types of household living. And that language is actually in your packet on the top of page 4. Double underline basically says, and I can read it into the record, is that residential development is not subject to any limitations in section 3.3.1 or section 4.6.36. 4.636 is the developmental use standard. There's language there as well that refers to the 30% cap. So just for consistency in both provisions, the recommendation is to amend that language.
Without objection? No, Councilmember Joanna.
Not necessarily. I don't think I'm objecting. I just want to clarify. So this is just, that could mean you could do a townhome or a duplex or a tribe, and that would not, that wouldn't be related to the cap in that way. That's just saying these other household types could be included.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's
great.
the condensed version, yes.
Perfect. The less clear version,
Yeah.
I guess, than you said. But yeah, okay, it's clear to me. That's fine with me. Thank you.
Great, yeah. The idea is to give flexibility on housing options here to turn a parking lot at a regional mall into housing, which is a positive. Great.
With that, so the second amendment was the technical amendment that was proposed by the Department of Permanent Services, as noted in the packet. Essentially, the way how the language is drafted, or the zoning text amendment was drafted, The second part of it talks about the regional shopping center containing at least 600 square feet of gross floor area. Want to be careful because gross floor area means the entire building, mechanical and everything else. Gross leasable is referring to the actual leasable space that's given to the retail. And so there's a technical amendment to make sure that when we're talking about the 600,000 square feet, we're talking about the gross leasable floor. That's already defined in the zoning ordinance, and that's there. Council staff agrees with that and is supportive of that amendment.
Yeah,
as well.
this was the intent. It was a good flag by Department of Permitting Services. We appreciate them raising it. The goal here is to maintain commercial retail at a regional shopping center, but allow for housing. And this would make sure that that minimum number is actually for, leasable retail space, not necessarily just space. So, without objection? Without objection, and Council President.
I was trying to come up with a really hard question for you, just to give you a welcome on the ZTA world, but I cannot. Yeah, it's a simple one, but thank you for all your work. Congratulations.
Ditto, echo that, second, all the things. Okay. I think that's it.
That wraps up.
Okay, fantastic. All those in favor of approving the zoning text amendment as amended, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 3-0. Appreciate that, and thank you, congratulations, and
Thank you.
what she said.
And I will return the reins to Ms. Nadeau and let her take them.
Couldn't have said it better myself than the council president, so I won't even try for a change. All right. We're going they're all that easy, by the way. Every zoning text amendment is that easy, Fantastic. All right, we're going to move on to item 3 on, yeah, exactly. Take yes for an answer and get out of here. We're going to move on to item 3. We're going to come to our tried and true, our tested, they say the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is understanding that you shouldn't put it in a fruit cup. So we're bringing the wisdom up here, who knows that not all zoning text amendments are quite that easy. So now we have zoning text amendment 2603, biohealth priority campus eligibility. Really excited about this item, and just wanted to appreciate Ms. Nadeau for all of her work on this and her work on the previous iteration from this. This is one of 2 measures that are part of an Accelerate MoCo package that we have put together. They both amend measures that I put forth that were approved by the council in 2022 and 2023, zoning text amendment 2109 and 2302. The original legislative measures were groundbreaking in that they established an expedited review process for certain biohealth and mixed income affordable housing projects. I worked closely with Lorianne Sales on the mixed income affordable housing projects, and I'm pleased to work together again with her on that. And we worked together with our biohealth community when we asked them the question of what is preventing you from expanding, or what is preventing the next large biohealth company from coming to Montgomery County. And the answer overwhelming was the time it takes to build a large-scale biohealth lab or to expand biohealth headquarters. And so that's what we really move forward with this effort. This process reduces the regulatory review timeline by 75%. It really focuses on the areas of tightening the timeframes, on allowing for processes that has historically been consecutive and allowing them to be concurrent, meaning you don't have to wait for one process to end before another one can begin, and then holding the county departments and county agencies accountable to the public and to our businesses that we need and want to invest in Montgomery County by saying, if we hold you to a deadline, we're going to hold ourselves to a deadline too, that we can't just hold up your projects in perpetuity. That's a standard that we would not allow and expect of you, and we wouldn't allow and expect it of ourselves either. I just want to appreciate the planning department for all of their work. There was some consternation and concern as we were developing the original zoning text amendments when we first put this through, and I know there was significant staff feedback of how this was going to work, and we were able to work through all those issues then eventually, And now this has been just a really great positive experience with council staff and planning staff and other stakeholders being able to work together to move us forward. The idea is we have to make it easier, cheaper, and faster to build housing and to invest in jobs in Montgomery County. And these efforts will build on that. And they're also based on recommendations that planning themselves said, if you want these to work even better, let's expand them a little more. And so that's what these will do. We'll build on the work that we had previously done. We'll take up ZTA 2603 first, which was introduced on January 27th. That's what amends the definition of biohealth priority campus, lowers the threshold to qualify for that use, and for the expedited review process. And wanted to especially thank Council President Fanny Gonzalez for her support and also for her leadership on these issues as chair of the Economic Development Committee. And she's working on complementary efforts to make it easier for all employers to be able to invest in Montgomery County, which has always been part of the goal of this effort. And so I appreciate her taking up that aspect as well. And Councilmember Lukey, Council Vice President Balcom, Council Members Evans, Stewart, and our colleague on the dais, Councilmember Jawanda, for his support as well. So thank you to each of you for your work and your leadership. I want to thank Councilmember Jawanda, who was on this committee as we were taking up these issues previously when I introduced the prior measures as well. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Ms. Ndu to walk us through the items, but it's fairly simple in the sense that we already supported this. The question is, do we want to make it a little bit broader, a little bit more expansive to allow some more organizations to be able to qualify by lowering the square footage threshold for both expansions and for new biohealth headquarters? So with that, I will turn it to you.
All right. Good afternoon, committee. Yes, the agenda is a day of familiarity today. So for the public hearing, there was only one registered speaker from the planning board and no written testimony was received. We did receive a racial equity and social justice impact statement from OLO, which noted disproportionate ownership in these industries, but it also note that in 22, when the CTA was passed, based on, I think it was our first RESJ statement, the council voted on a biohealth opportunity zone incentive program, which does provide grant funding for economic development in underinvested communities. OLO did have two policy recommendations here. One requiring companies that receive grant funding to provide more opportunities for BIPOC businesses to have spillover benefits, such as choosing them first as vendors, and then also partnering with other stakeholders to provide more job opportunities. And then lastly, asking our grant recipients to track and report data. There is also a recommendation from the planning board, who unanimously recommended approval, as noted by the chair. And then a climate assessment as well that noted potential minor increases in building-related emissions associated with increased development activity, but that's offset by the positive impacts from adaptive reuse and supporting smaller development footprints, especially near transit areas. So I will not go through the background. Thank you, Chair. And so starting on page 3 with the details of the ZTA. First, the ZTA will lower the square footage requirement. Originally, it was 150,000 square feet of new construction. Under ZTA 2603, that will be lowered to 100,000 square feet. And then in addition here is that existing or group of buildings, instead of 50,000 square feet, that requirement will be lowered to 25,000 square feet. And then the definition of biohealth priority campus will actually be expanded to also include 100,000 square feet of new space that was repurposed. So the original ZTA really thought about getting new development, so a new building adding to a building, but the feedback that's been received from applicants is adaptive reuse could be really popular in this space, and so if you are doing adaptive reuse of 100,000 square feet, you could also take advantage of this expedited approval process. And then lastly, a technical correction that I remember this amendment well from the council session on this, to change the reference to Corridor City's Transitway to corridor connectors. I believe at this point, if not in the next CTA or two, that should be updated throughout the code. We're sort of doing them as we hit each CTA, and that's based on the corridor forward plan. And that is the CTA before you. And there's one proposed amendment, if there's something else.
Appreciate it. I'll just note on the square footage threshold, this was originally the request and recommendation from planning of what the threshold should be, and I just appreciate that planning has come back and said, you know, I think we can do more. I think we can allow for more. I think we can handle it. And based on the current market conditions, we should lower that threshold. So I wanted it to be lower. We were trying to work together to be practical and pragmatic and reasonable, and appreciate the fact that we should always be revisiting, you know, new things that we're doing, groundbreaking things that we're doing to make sure that they're actually achieving what we want. So I just wanted to note that. Let's go to the technical amendment.
Okay, so the technical amendment will correct an outdated reference. As has been noted, we have several expedited plans in the zoning ordinance now, and so they've moved around a lot. So this technical amendment is to change the reference to Biohealth Priority Campus, so the new expedited approval plan section. Basically, the procedures for these plans are all in one place. So the strategy moving forward is to just refer to the whole category, and so that's what that technical amendment is.
Without objection? Without objection, and let me turn it over to Councilor Joando.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this, and a deja vu for sure, but glad I still feel as strongly about it. We want to encourage more of this and as many as possible. And lowering the threshold, obviously, and allowing for adaptive reuse, all that will try to juice this up a little bit. Just, I was looking, who's taking advantage of this? Do we have data? I know we have the chair here. Have there been applicants that have taken advantage? That's what I thought, right? No one has taken advantage of the original legislation in a few years. So
yes, that is my understanding, that we have not received an application for this specific use.
Right. So that's why we want to, go back to the pot here and say, let's make it a little smaller. We want you to use it, make it a little sweeter. So hopefully we will get some usage.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is that we had is there were some folks that were talking about it and were looking at getting into the marketplace for this, and then the biohealth industry crumbled under the Trump administration's dismantling of federal research, and the entire regulatory environment has been completely upset. By lowering it, it allows for us to have a chance even in this challenging environment, and I think that's important. We got to manage the moment and get through the moment, but it also sets us up as that industry comes back, which we hope and expect that it will, particularly with a new focus on science and on research and on the regulatory environment, that we're setting ourselves up to take advantage. I think one of the challenges is if we wait until the biohealth industry is back to where we want it to be, we'll miss it. Because we want the investments when they start happening again as they were. There were multi-billions of dollars of investments that were happening, and not enough of them were happening in Montgomery County because it took too long. It was one of the reasons why we were trying to respond here. Too much of it was happening in Research Triangle and other places. Even Frederick was starting to, compete against us and say, hey, if you want to be close to the biocenter of the region but go faster, you come to Frederick, come to another part of the region. And we didn't want to allow for that to happen. So there's a couple in process and thinking through this and where this was based off of. But ultimately, this will help us to ensure that we get more and set us up for success as the industry comes back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was at the AstraZeneca announcement, which is a $2 billion investment between Frederick and us in Gaithersburg. So we want to keep rolling. Thank you.
Great. Okay. I don't think there's any other comments or questions. All those in favor of the zoning text amendment as amended, that is 3-0. Thank you, colleagues, for your support and thoughtfulness. We're going to move on to zoning text amendment 2604, mixed income housing, community eligibility. This is, as noted, introduced by myself and Councilmember Sales. We introduced it on the 27th. The public hearing was last week on March 3rd. And this similarly lowers the square footage requirement that we had as a baseline, and also expands the low-income housing tax credits, which was suggested by planning from just 9%, which are the most competitive to also include 4% low-income housing tax credits, which essentially means that any qualified project of any state, federal, or county affordable housing project will effectively qualify for this expedited review, which is what I think we want to do. There are examples of those who have taken advantage of this, including a significant project on Neville Street, which we're very excited about. I was speaking to the affordable housing provider of that a couple months ago, and they were talking about just how impactful this was. When we were originally going through this effort, I just wanted to note, when we were at the residences at Forest Glen, we asked them, because they were finalizing their project as this was coming through the pipeline from the legislative process, of what the cost savings would have been if we had had this process in place when that project went through, and they estimated nearly $8 million. Imagine what $8 million could do. That's an entirely new subsidy from the county that could go to have an entirely new mixed income housing community. That's greater levels of depths of affordability. That's a larger number of affordable units. That's an entire class of workforce housing that a mixed income housing could include, above the 80%, but below the 120% of area median income to serve firefighters and teachers and nurses and police officers. There's just so much that we can do just by fixing the processes. And so I just wanted to note and appreciate that. And the goal here is we want more, and this will allow us to do more, and appreciate the planning effort and work on this. I'll note this was similar. There was a concern of having too many qualified projects and being able to keep up. And so we didn't include the 4% tax credits at first, but planning has stepped up and said we can handle it, we should do it, this is a priority, we all are all in on affordable housing projects, let's expand it, let's include it, and so that's what we're doing. Ms. Sindhu?
Yeah. So this one is very similar. Public hearing on the same day. The only registered speaker, again, from Planning Board, and no written testimony received. A positive RESJ impact statement noting the increase of affordable housing, and Planning Board unanimously recommended approval. For the climate assessment, the impact noted by planning was that this is actually not expected to increase the distribution of housing. It will typically be in places where housing would have happened, and so the climate impact is a bit more void there, but it would be a positive impact on community resilience and adaptive capacity. So going into the ZTA itself, on page 3, again, this is adjusting some of the thresholds. This one, there's a little more give and take happening. So the definition of a mixed income housing community, it's going to eliminate the 150,000 square foot requirement, and in exchange for that, increase the number of dwelling units required from 30 to 50. The reasoning here is, of course, the intent is to get more affordable housing, but a lot of applications have been received that are for less than 150,000 square feet, but actually have more than 30 units. So this should be a better balance that allows more applicants to take advantage of this process. And then as noted, including the 4% LIHTC projects are low-income housing tax credits, in addition to the 9% that were already in there. And according to planning, this should allow at least an additional 2 to 3 projects to qualify each year. So that's the overview of the tweaks being made to the definition. And then this CTA has a similar technical amendment of just updating some of those cross-references you find all over the zoning code.
Fantastic. All right. Technical amendment without objection, and all those in favor of approving this zoning text amendment as amended, that is 3-0. Thank you, colleagues. Appreciate the work. We were close to as efficient as discussed, and with that, we are adjourned.